Home sellers, you've got tenants in place, you're thinking of selling, but how do you do it without freaking them out, blowing up your rental income, or scaring off buyers? I've sold over 2,500 homes, roughly 50 times more than the average realtor in an entire career. And we've helped dozens of sellers navigate this exact situation. So today, I'm giving you our complete How to Sell with Tenants playbook. This is how we do it. So stick around. We'll show you how to get everything you want from your best buyer without making enemies out of your tenants. All right, let's go. Welcome to Talking Realty, the podcast for home sellers who want to make more money, save time, and avoid headaches. I'm your host, Glen Whitten, founder of the Ohio Property Group, where we do the same things as traditional realtors, but instead of charging a huge 6% commission, we charge a low flat fee. So you keep more of your money and still get better results. Check out all of our many free seller tools, including the materials we're using today at talkingrealty.com. And if you like the show, hit the subscribe button. Now, let's get to it. Hello, home sellers. This episode, like most episodes, is inspired by an interaction with one of our sellers. So a little while back, I listed a property with multiple tenants. Not a huge property, but it had a few tenants in it. And during the pre-launch phase, we had the same discussion we have with every landlord who is selling their property. We have a series of questions that we ask them to determine a handful of decisions that have to be made by the seller. But this framework helps them decide how to attack the process and what their end goal is. So today, I thought I would share our entire playbook on how we make these decisions. Mainly, how do we prep for marketing? How do we set the price? Because that's always a biggie. How do we handle showings, which is probably the biggest? How do we handle difficult tenants? How do we negotiate offer terms that are unique to a rental situation with tenants? And how do we handle the due diligence process for the inspection, the appraisal, and maybe even up to and including the final walkthrough? So if you're considering getting out of the landlord game, but you're not quite sure what the pitfalls might be, today is for you. The good news is that there really isn't a right way to sell a property when you have tenants. There are a number of variables that will determine your best path to get where you're going. But in the end, if you market it correctly, i.e. in the MLS, and you price it right, hint, hint, that's a huge deal, you'll get it sold. You will get through it. I promise. You might have a few battle scars, but you will make it. So the first question we ask sellers is, why are you selling? Are you cashing out, or are you just tired of being a landlord? Maybe a property management issue, or maybe you're shifting strategies and you're looking for different types of properties to make money. Or maybe, like my dad, you're selling off all your rentals to finance your trip around the world, whatever. But the question why, when it's answered, that informs kind of how we handle the rest of the process with the tenants and the marketing and the pricing and so forth. So this is really where we have to start. Next up is, how do you feel about the tenants? Do you like them? Are you worried about them? We've got some mercenary sellers who are just like, yeah, whatever. They're a means to an end. Then I have other folks who are very connected to their tenants. Maybe they've had them for years and years, and they want to do right by them, and maybe even to the point of making some financial sacrifices along the way. But if that's how they're feeling, then that's how they're feeling. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the math says. On the other hand, if you're just sick of being a landlord, or maybe the properties went vacant and that's why you decided to sell, do I find another tenant and start this whole process over? Or do I maybe take some chips off the table and move on? And as a bonus, the reason you're selling, quite honestly, should be addressed in the marketing somewhere. Explaining why upfront, why avoids the, well, if it's such a great deal, if it's such a great investment, why are you selling? Because we're going to go out and paint the picture in the marketing that this is a great deal, and it is a great investment, and it is a great opportunity. But if it's such a great opportunity, why is the seller walking away? We need to build a story around that explains it, checks that box. So if you can answer that question, you're going to bring more buyers into the fold. And truth number 6, more buyers, more money. Hey, before we get too far down the road, I want you to know that every single tool I mention is included on pages 79 through 82 of our Ultimate Home Selling Toolkit. It's totally free. It's packed with exact sales contracts, forms, templates, checklists, everything we use to manage the hundreds and hundreds of home sales we do every year. So whether you're selling by owner or you just kind of want to know what to expect out there, this thing is pure gold for you. So pick up your free copy at talkingrealty.com or check the show notes. And there is a link there. Seriously, hit pause, go do it now so you can follow along. All right. And back to the podcast. So once we've nailed down why you're selling, we can go ahead and start talking about your tenants and what to do with them. By the way, all of this happens before you launch. So as we're working through, I've got pages 79 and 80, which is our tenant checklist. We will continue to chip away at that through this episode. But tenants tend to be very fearful, and they're worried about rate hikes. They're worried about evictions, just change in general. You know, you're talking about someone who has zero control or very little control over the place they call home. You can imagine the type of angst that brings when a tenant finds out that the ownership is changing. I'm talking about the duplexes, the triplexes, the quads that people have, that the landlord or the owner has regular contact with the tenants. Immediately, some sellers are like, well, I don't want my tenants to know. I don't want to tell the tenants that I'm selling. Well, maybe 25, 30 years ago, you could get away with that. But in 2025, that is not reality. You have to understand there is a very, very slim chance that you could sell and not have the tenant get wind of it before the deal goes down. Since it's highly probable that the tenants are going to find out about the sale, you might as well control how that happens. And one of the ways you can really reduce the anxiety is to be transparent, be up front. And odds are tenants know each other. So if even one finds out because they're trolling to buy a house, it's going to spread like wildfire through the whole building. So the faster you can get out in front of this, the better off you'll be. If you're not upfront with your tenants, when they find out that you're selling, they are naturally going to assume the worst. They're going to wonder why you didn't say anything. They're going to wonder, what are you hiding? What's wrong? Is there something wrong with the building? Is the rent going through the roof? Are they all going to get kicked out? Are you selling to a developer who's going to turn it into a mini mall? You know, whatever. Those worst possible scenarios just kind of run rampant. And if you get them talking, the tenants, just forget it. It's going to turn into all kinds of crazy stuff. So all of that can be very, very bad. But if these are decent tenants that you actually care about, why not explain to them? Just go to them before the house goes on the market or before the property goes on the market and explain to them that you're selling and why. Give them the why behind it. Now, you don't have to tell them your whole business, but give them enough, just like the buyer, enough of the story that they're okay. It will also alleviate their fears and give them a chance to ask questions. And there's actually several benefits to telling your tenants upfront that you're planning to sell. But one of them is not having them torpedo your deal. So if you can get in front of it, bring them kind of into the fold, as it were, you never know. Another reason why you want to talk to your tenants is you'd be surprised how many times in these 2 to 4 unit situations, one of the tenants is looking to buy, or maybe knows somebody who is looking to buy. It can't hurt, because if you can get it sold quickly and quietly for a decent profit, why not? Now, I'm always a fan of getting to the broader market, but in the case where you have a lot of tenants and you care about them, that has a cost. So if you can maybe circumvent that entire process and that's valuable to you, great. If you're just tired of being a landlord and that's why you're selling, maybe one of your tenants steps up and says, well, I'll manage this place for you. What do you need me to do? So maybe you get to keep it after all. You get to keep the income, less a small percentage, for having somebody who's literally on site take care of the building for you. But if you're upfront with your tenants, they have a vested interest in solving this, just like you do. So approach them, see what happens. If you don't know your tenants, you don't care, then obviously you're going to skip all this. So the only downside that I can think of to telling your tenants that you're going to sell is that one of them may freak out and decide that they're going to leave. In my opinion, that was going to happen anyway. And I think it's far less likely to happen if you tell them versus they hear it on the street or see it on the internet or hear it from another tenant. They were going to do it anyway. So get in front of it, make the situation far more controllable. If they're worried about rent hikes and you care about these tenants, you can always lock them into a longer new lease before you sell it. In the state of Ohio, like a lot of places, when you sell a property that has a tenant, that tenant has rights. But if you have a lease signed with a tenant, when you sell the property, the lease is part of the deal. The new owner must honor the terms of a signed lease. So if you're truly concerned about the rent going up or about any changes to the way things are for those tenants that you care about, and again, finances are not your primary concern. They're up there, but they're not number one. You'd rather do right by the tenant than just sign them to a 12-month lease at whatever terms you guys come up with. And then boom, that's done. It gives them 12 months to decide whether or not they like what's going on. Just as many buyers as you turn off by having people sign new leases, you're going to bring in a different set of buyers who are looking for guaranteed steady income. Because if I've got a bunch of tenants who are on month to month, that it might be attractive to one type of buyer, but it might be unattractive to another type of buyer who's looking for that steady income versus saying, hey, I've got tenants who've been here an average of 5 years and they're all on long-term leases. That becomes unattractive to the person who wants to renovate and flip, but it becomes more attractive to the other type of buyer. So no matter what you do, you're going to be attracting and repelling specific buyers. So that's why I said in the beginning, there's no real right way to do this. It all depends on what you want. If the tenant wants to stick around for a specific amount of time, maybe it's only 6 months, great. Tear up their current lease. That's totally fine. If they want to lock in terms for say 6 months, at which point maybe their job is changing, they're out of school, or who knows what's happening, then go ahead and make that happen. It also gives the tenants a chance to see what the new owner is going to look like, how that's going to shake out. And if they don't like what they see in the first 30 or 60 days, now they've got a few months to go out and find a new place. Win-win. But as I see it, there is absolutely no downside to talking to your tenants, only upside. Once you've determined why you're selling and how you're going to handle your tenants in terms of telling them, not telling them, what you're going to tell them and how much, you need to take the next step, which is getting into pricing and marketing. Something else that's unique about income properties is they have multiple ways of being valued. When we try to establish value for a single family home, we are able to look at what we call comparable or comp sales, meaning we just take a circle around that house of say a quarter mile, maybe up to a couple of miles, depending on how sparsely populated it is. And we're going to look at anything that's similar to what you're selling and has also sold, say, within the last 3 to 12 months. And we're going to use that to kind of pinpoint the value. Well, comp sales are great, but when you're talking about maybe a 2 to 4 unit building, especially if it's converted from an old giant Victorian single family, you're going to have a tough time finding comps because there's probably not that many old Victorians that got converted unless the whole neighborhood went that route. But if you are struggling to find comps or the comps don't make sense, you can actually use the rent and the expenses to do what's called an income or a cap rate approach. You can value it to an investor because this will make more sense to them. You can certainly show them comps if they're out there, but this is probably more along the lines of what they're looking for. And in the case of a cap rate, you're talking about net operating income divided by the value. That's how you get your cap rate. In other words, based on the financials, meaning the rent that's coming in and the expenses that are going out, what do I think this property is worth to me? To me. Remember, investors don't fall in love with properties, not smart ones anyway. They fall in love with deals, according to Mr. Robert Kiyosaki, the rich dad, poor dad guy. Let's say you want a cap rate of 10%. You take the annual rent and you multiply that by the occupancy rate. So how often is it filled? Well, if it's been filled nonstop for the last 5 years, well, then we can safely say the occupancy rate is 100%. But if you have some turnover, there's going to be a certain amount of vacancy that eats into your occupancy rate. So for a quick example, if you've got, say, $1,000 in net income out of a property every month, and you're looking for a 10% cap rate, the way you get there is you take that $1,000 in net income, you multiply it by 12 months, gives you $12,000, and then you divide it by the cap rate that you want, in this case, 10%. That gives you a value of approximately $120,000. And that's about what that property is worth to you. So if somebody's looking for a higher or lower cap rate, that number is going to change. If you have a different net income or occupancy rate that affects it, All of that is going to come into play. Another emerging way for investors to get money is the DSCR loan. This is a loan that's approved based on the rental income versus expenses rather than the strength of the borrower. With a DSCR loan, which by the way stands for debt service coverage ratio, whoever's lending the money is going to look at the deal, look at the property, look at the financials verified, and then they're going to base their decision mostly on that and maybe a little bit on the buyer, maybe a little bit on their credit and their track record of making payments. But far more so, they're going to put it into the value of the deal. So your pricing strategy is going to partially depend on all of these factors, but also on whether you're marketing to somebody who is an investor versus someone who is maybe going to live there. Because we see these all the time, a duplex or a 3-unit where one is vacant, and it's also a little bit nicer, bigger, etc. It's maybe the only one that has an attached garage or something like that. That becomes the owner occupant part of the property. And then the owner occupant lives there while the renters pay their mortgage, essentially. That's one type of approach. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to determine a value for this property, and you're going to have to communicate that value somehow. So once we've talked to the tenants, we've figured out why we're selling, and we've determined the value, it's time to get moving. So we need to prep and market this thing. Now, normally, I am not a huge fan of virtual tours. I'm not a huge fan of them on single family homes, and we can probably deep dive that if I haven't already another day. But for today, I think when you have a property with multiple units, a virtual tour and excellent, thorough photography of all the units is a must have. A virtual tour saves that investor time, and it's going to bring you more and more potential buyers because a lot of these investors do not live locally. Many of them are out-of-state people. With tenants and an out-of-state pool of investors, you're going to have local investors too, but you're going to have some out-of-staters. Why not attract all of them? Because if they can't get good photos because you don't have them, or because the tenants won't let you in, or you don't want to bother them and take good photos, you're going to greatly diminish the number of buyers that are attracted to this property. So when we're in the prep phase, this is the time. And we'll talk about how to get those. So if you've been upfront with your tenants, it's a lot easier. And if you have great photos and a virtual tour, you're also going to cut way down on the number of disruptions to your tenants. You don't want to involve them at every step of the way. I've got properties right now with tenants that are getting shown 3 and 4 and 5 times a week. That's a pain in the butt. And the poor tenant, they're not getting anything out of this. In fact, they've got nothing but anxiety about it. And yet they have to disrupt their lives over and over every week while people come and look at these properties. Crazy. All could have been avoided with a great virtual tour and a great set of photography and a really good description with a packet of information, which we'll talk about here shortly. So the big question is, if you have tenants, how are you supposed to get this amazing photography and virtual tour done? Well, first of all, I would hire somebody. You could hire my buddy Lucas, who was on a couple episodes ago, or get a hold of us if you're in Ohio. I know lots and lots of good photographers across the whole state, so let me know. But you schedule it for a couple of hours. And since you've told the tenants that you're selling, you can tell them at that session that, hey, by the way, I'm also going to be doing some prep work. So I know this is very disruptive and I apologize, but I'm only going to do it the one time so that you don't have to keep leaving for showings. I'm doing this for you. So what I need is a day or part of a day at your unit while we make this happen. If you want to, you could also induce them a couple of different ways. And again, talking about spending a few dollars to make a lot of dollars here. Number one, ask the tenant, what's your favorite restaurant, or where's your favorite place to take your kids if they have kids? And then go get them a gift card and just say, listen, I know it's a pain, but do me a favor, go spend the day at Cedar Point on me, or go spend the day at Kings Island on me. Here's a bunch of movie passes and some concessions gift cards, so you can go and take your kids to the movies and have a blast. I don't know. Talk to your tenants, find out what makes their socks roll up and down, and then give them a gift card to go do that. The small amount of money you're going to spend to have them out of the way while you're doing this is worth it. And let them know, hey, while you're gone, we're going to be doing some tidying up. Now, maybe some tenants are paranoid and they want to be there. Fine. Just say, no problem. We're not going to do anything without you there. The goal here, though, is to get the good photography from all the units. So it's very, very recent. And then you don't have to fool with some of these other things. Because when we list a house that has tenants and we don't have interior photos, it's like the number one question. We get it over and over and over and over. Well, how are they going to buy without seeing it? Well, there's ways, and we'll talk about those ways, but it's not ideal. I would much rather have this good photography, good walkthrough video that I can give to any serious buyer, or just plop it up on the MLS so that everybody can see it, and then bring in more and more buyers. I get that there are some security issues, which is why these tenants should depersonalize as much as possible before you take these photos. Give them that heads up, get them in the boat with you, and compensate them a little bit. I don't care. Knock some off their rent for the month. Do something to make it worth their while to help you so that we go out and have some success. Not saying it's going to work 100% of the time, but it's going to work a lot better than some of the alternatives. In a perfect world, of course, when the unit turns over and you go in and clean it and paint it and do whatever you do to it and it's empty, that's the time to take new photos. This should be standard operating procedure if you've got a 2 to 4 unit, is that anytime it turns over and you do all that prep work to make it beautiful to rent again, you should reshoot the photography so that you have it. And then even if it's a year or two from now, people can say, I don't have the current photos, but I do have it from right before this tenant moved in. So I can show you that. It's also good security when it comes time to do the security deposit discussion at the end. You have irrefutable evidence of what the place looked like before they moved in, and you know what it looked like when they moved out. So you can determine how much, if any, of their deposit they're getting back. One other thing you can do to kind of induce cooperation from your tenants is, again, this is case by case, but maybe have a professional cleaner come in. I don't know, just let them know, hey, you know what? This is on me. I'm going to have somebody come in and clean the entire place, top to bottom, front to back, so we can photograph it. And by the way, I'm also sending you to Cedar Point for the day. You're going to spend some money to make all this happen, but it's going to pay off in spades. So once you have the photography and the virtual tour down, you need to put together a full investor packet. This is right out of page 79 of our home seller toolkit, which you can get for free. Check the show notes and check the comments, and I'll link to it there. I'll run through the high points of this. The more questions you can answer with this packet and the photography and the description, the more buyers you're going to get. Truth number 4, buyers look for reasons not to buy. This applies to investors too. When they're working through dozens of deals a week or a month, and they see gaps in information that they have to chase down, they are rapidly losing interest because they know you're going to be a pain in the butt the rest of the way. And I'm not saying every investor is like that. Some of them are into the chase and they don't mind because they like scouring for deals. But more often than not, if you provide them with a lot of the data they're going to be looking for up front, you have won a lot more of them over early, which will, again, drive up the number of potential buyers. That will make you more money in the long run. And furthermore, the more of these questions you answer before the showing, before the offer, if there is a showing, but before the offer and before we start getting into due diligence, the higher likelihood you have of snagging a deal that's going to go the distance. When we have these gaps of information, when we don't have good photos, when the buyer can't see the inside of the property from recent photos or a walkthrough video, all these questions appear. They may still pull the trigger on a really good deal. You work your butt off, you back and forth on terms, and you put it together. And then all of a sudden they get to see the place, they get to see the financials, and that deal just starts to take a nosedive. All right. The love is never going to be higher than during the offer. It's just not. So why not get this all done and out of the way and in front of that buyer? So now you're only dealing with qualified buyers who are eyes wide open, who are far less likely to beat you up after they get the deal inked, because that's what's going to happen when you leave these gaps with photos, when you leave these gaps with this investor packet that I'm proposing for you, you're just inviting a fight down the road. Oh, well, I didn't know the expenses. I didn't know the utilities were that high. Oh, I didn't know this. I didn't know that. Or, oh man, it looks like those appliances are needing to be redone. All these reasons why, whether they're real or not, if you haven't checked those boxes before the offer, you're going to have to check them afterwards. And that's not good for you. So included in my dream investor packet would be all of the HOA information. Now, a lot of these 2 and 4 unit buildings don't have it. So if not, count yourself lucky. You don't have to deal with the HOA. But if you are part of an HOA, gather up all that information. They're going to want not only the bylaws, but they're going to want to see all the meeting notes. They're going to see the financials, the reserve funds, on and on. And the reason they want the meeting notes is to see what's coming down the pike. Because typically if there's going to be a rate increase or a huge assessment, that comes up during the HOA meetings. And it gets talked about before it becomes policy. So savvy investors are going to look at and read all of that stuff. If you don't have it, big question mark, reason not to buy. The rent roll. I get 10 different versions of the rent roll. So I put together my favorite version. It's in the packet. It's actually on page 82 of our home seller toolkit. That's my sample rent roll. If you want the Google file, like the Google Sheets file that I use to create it, just I put it out there just so you could see it and make your own. But if you don't want to make your own, you just want mine, that's fine. Just get a hold of me, DM me, email me, whatever, and I will send you the Google Sheets file. Who does all of the lawn and snow maintenance? If you're in Ohio, there's snow and there's lawn, more than likely, unless you got some concrete dream out there. But either way, you're going to have to deal with what's going on outside the building. Answer that question, because it's going to calculate into the expenses. So speaking of expenses, profit and loss statements, make your numbers available. Now, if you want to hold back to only serious buyers, I'm not a big fan of friction, but I get it. Some people don't want to, open their books to everyone. So I'll leave that to you. If it was me, I'd put together a P&L that's not my entire P&L. I'm not going to open my QuickBooks for them, but I will put together a sample P&L for them with actual numbers from these units and provide it. They're going to want to see it anyway. Copies of all leases. If you're month to month, you don't have a lease, but you probably have some basic terms that you've agreed upon in a prior lease. So if you had an old lease that we're still running month to month on, bring that in and just tell them that, hey, this is the lease we started with, and right now we're month to month. If you have a current lease, naturally just provide a copy of that. If the lease has certain information that you don't want out there, like personal information about the tenant, then certainly black some of that out. Get a pre-sale inspection. I mean, I don't know how many more times I'm going to say this in this world, but I guess at least one more. Get a pre-sale inspection. The pre-sale inspection is one of the best returns on investment. I don't care if you're selling a single family or a 4-unit building, it doesn't matter. Getting that pre-sale inspection, being able to hand a recent home inspection report to a potential buyer has so much power. Not only does it save them from having to get their own, more than likely, because not all the time, but most of the time, when we hand a buyer a pre-sale inspection that's a month old, they're probably not going to run out and pay $600 or $700 for another one. Doesn't mean they won't, but far less likely. So if you can skip the entire inspection process, count your lucky stars, because a lot of deals die right there during the due diligence. Have I made my case about pre-sale inspections yet? Okay, anyway. All the maintenance records and warranties. Big top 5 question we get. How old is the roof? How old are the HVAC? Does it have central air? How old are the water heaters? Because these are all potential huge expenses to the new owner. They want to make sure that they know, did you run everything down to its last year? You built it brand new 20 years ago, and now everything's starting to age out. Well, that new owner has a right to know that. And whether or not you agree with that, they're going to want to know it. So you might as well put it all together. Maybe you had a basement waterproofing done and it's got a transferable warranty, or maybe you had a termite treatment done and you think, oh, that's terrible, I don't want anybody to know that, but it's got a 5-year transferable warranty. No, this is a good thing. You found the problem, you dealt with it, and now you've got a warranty that will help the new owner. All these things are good. And then, of course, maintenance records. How often was the furnace serviced? How often do you have the gutters cleaned? Things like that. Let people know with actual numbers and real paperwork how much maintenance you've done. If you don't have any of these records, okay, it's not a deal killer, but it probably is going to weed out certain buyers who want that information. Because if you don't have it, they're going to A, assume the worst, and B, have to go get it. So the sooner you put it together, the better. Utility costs. Not just the average utilities, because when a property is vacant, naturally the owner needs to know what the average utilities are. Certainly it'll be lower when there's nobody there for water, electric, things like that. But also having the average utilities helps establish what the rent can be. And this all figures in. So having the average utilities and a breakdown of who pays what is something every investor packet should have in it. And then finally, what are the laundry and parking situation? Comes up all the time. What's the parking? Is it on street, off street? Is it covered, uncovered, assigned, not assigned? Are there storage units that go with them? What's the laundry? Is it in the unit? Is it in the building? Is it nowhere to be found? If it's in the building, who owns the equipment? On and on and on. Same with the other appliances is how old is the refrigerators by unit? So unit 1 through 4, if they were all bought at the same time, fine. Unit 1 was 2024, Unit 2 was 2021, et cetera, et cetera. What stays with it? I've lived in places, during my younger years where I had to bring my own appliances. Fine. Just tell potential buyers what's going on with all of the laundry, the parking, and the appliances. So we've prepped it. We've talked to our tenants. We've got our photos. I'm just kind of running through this for you again. So we've done all these things to get it ready to sell. And now we're finally going to put it on the market. We've got our packet together, our photography, our marketing. We've hired Glen to put us in the MLS and make sure our marketing is fire. Now it's time for engaging potential buyers. I prefer not to have buyers go through these units unless they're vacant. If you've got 1 or 2 vacant units and the rest are occupied, great. Have them look at the vacant units, show them your fancy, amazing pictures of the other units. But if for whatever reason you need to have people going through a tenant-occupied property, I am normally not a huge fan of showing friction. I did a whole episode on why properties don't sell. And one of the main reasons was all of this friction that sellers put on the showings. Well, I don't want a bunch of looky-loos. I don't want this. I don't want that. Show me your bank statement before I set up a showing. I get it, but don't do it. It's not, you're just cutting down the number of potential buyers. And at the risk of being a broken record here, more buyers, more money. Guess what? Fewer buyers, less money. Just saying. But in this case, because I'm now dealing with a person who's living there that I don't want to spook or hassle more than I necessarily need to, I'm going to set some pretty firm restrictions. I'll probably, if it was my property, I would set a very firm window, maybe 1 weeknight and 1 weekend afternoon, and that's it. You can see it on Tuesday evenings from 3 to 7, or you can see it on Saturday from 2 to 5. And that's it. Because this shows a lot of respect for the tenants, and it also helps you weed out these buyers who are not going to make it over the hump as far as financially. There are so many would-be investors out there right now who are just going to look and look and look and look and look and look and look at deals, and they're going to waste everybody's time and probably never pull the trigger. I don't want you to subject your tenants or yourself to that, to be honest. So limit them to blocks of time for an occupied property. In a vacant property, set it to go and show. Just let them go whenever they want. Just let them go. And if an agent's showing it, then you don't even need to be there. Just put it on a lockbox, set it for go and show, instant approval for your showings, and then get out of the way. But if it's tenant occupied, put your blocks down, and then also make sure they're booking a day or 2 in advance. Even though you've only got minimum blocks, I still want to give the tenant a heads up 2 days before, if possible, that says, hey, I've got 3 buyers coming through between 2 and 5 tomorrow, or 2 days from now on our prearranged time that we said we would use. And naturally, you're going to want to consult with the tenant about these blocks. Don't pick Tuesday 3 to 7 if that's a terrible time for them. But if that's when they're at work, or that's when they're out doing things with their family and they don't mind being out of the place, great. And oh, by the way, I'm going to give you a couple of days notice as to whether or not we're even going to show it. So if by Sunday night, I don't have anybody booked for Tuesday, that's it. Nobody gets in on Tuesday, and I can tell them that Sunday night. So everybody wins. And then if you have showings, great. They know to be out of the way and tidy the place up and so on and so forth. If you don't have any showings, then you don't have to bother them. If you've got a buyer who does manage to prove to you that they're willing and able to buy, and they can come to the showing that you've set up 2 days in advance, but they throw at you, well, my partner can't be here, or there's another decision maker, fine. Encourage them. Strongly encourage them to do this via Zoom or FaceTime on their phone so that we don't have to set up a second, third showing just so the partner can approve it. And many times, by the way, the partner approval is bogus anyway. It's just an escape clause for the investor. People teach this to them, that you should always build in a silent partner approval clause. No bueno, not with me. If there's a silent partner, they need to sign off before we make the deal, if that's how we're doing showings. Another thing you can do, if you don't want to get pre-approval information because maybe they're getting one of these DSCRs or something like that, or they're getting hard money, so they might not have a true pre-approval, but you could get a letter of intent from them. And a letter of intent is just a simple, non-binding piece of paper that says, hey, this is the type of money we're using, whether it's a cash or loan or hard money or some type of investment loan. What's the timeline? We need 25 days to close. We need 10 days of due diligence, that kind of thing. And then what's the proposed use? Are they going to keep the tenants? Are they going to move in and live there? Or are they going to turn it into a mini mall? And then what their basic price range is. And again, you're going to be dealing with these people quite a bit if they move forward. So this is a great chance for you to find out what they're about. If they send you a letter of intent that's all roses, then they throw you an offer that is thorns, you know you're dealing with somebody who probably shouldn't be trusted. Just saying. So the letter of intent is another good way. It's kind of low friction because it's pretty easy to do. And because I love you guys so much, I believe, yeah, page 81 right here in my packet is a sample letter of intent that I put together for you. So once again, you can use my template, make your own, or get a hold of me. You want the Google, this one is a Google Doc file. I can send it to you that way or in a Word file, just whatever. Just get a hold of me. I will make sure that somebody on my team gets it to you. So the last resort here with the showings is to do curbside offers. And curbside just means nobody gets in the property. You look at the video, you look at the photos, you look at the investor pack, you make your offer, and then you build into the offer a walkthrough within a certain number of days of acceptance. So in other words, we're going to do all the negotiation, then we're going to do the walkthrough. Not ideal, but if that's how you got to go because you truly don't want to screw around with your tenants, then fine, you can do that. But I would only do curbside if I had the great photography, the video walkthrough, and a complete investor packet, including a pre-inspection in case I need to beat that dead horse a few more times. I do love the dead horse. This episode of Talking Realty is brought to you by our friends at Associates Title. This team is shaking things up by focusing on what truly matters, putting the customer first. Imagine that. Whether you're buying, selling, or investing for sale by owner, working with a realtor, they've got your back with incredible cost savings and the latest tech to streamline the process. Their secure online portal, also known as Qualia, keeps everyone in the loop, from buyers and sellers to lenders and agents, all while keeping your data completely safe and your communications crystal clear. If you're getting ready to make a move, don't underestimate the importance of having a great title company on your side. Check them out today at associatestitleinc.com or call my friend Ryan Phillips at 614-419-2418. Check the show notes for that information, but do not leave your title company choice to chance, and definitely don't let the buyer or their agent make that choice for you. Okay, back to the show. So sometimes, no matter how much you've done and how much love you've showered on your tenants, you're going to get a pain in the butt tenant who's going to try to make this really, really hard for you. So despite your best intentions, the tenant ends up not cooperating. Maybe they refuse to allow a showing during a prearranged window. So they're not honoring their end of the deal. They're not making the unit accessible. Maybe they are failing to clean up before the photos. They just leave the place a total mess. In some cases, maybe they intimidate the buyers, or they speak negatively about the neighborhood or the building or you or the other tenants. All of this is fear-based, in my opinion, unless they just have a problem with you personally, or they just love stirring the pot, which always reminds me, I had a guy selling a 2-unit that had a couple of tenants, and one of them was awesome. The other one was a little bit of a difficult person. So we get the place under contract, and the owner sets up the inspection for a specific time and day, lets the tenants know, hey, do me a favor, just open the unit and leave. Like, just leave. He didn't incentivize them like I would have, at least an ice cream gift card or something, anything to get them to go do something else. But anyway, he didn't do that. So the tenant, who decided that he didn't like this whole thing, decides to stick around for the inspection. And he just starts going on and on to the new buyer and to the inspector about mold in the attic, about bad wiring, about bad plumbing and roof leaks and all of this stuff. Now, none of it was true, but this tenant killed that deal. So we had to work around it, and we ended up waiting until the tenant moved out, which was fortunately only a few weeks. So we took the property off the market, waited for the tenant to go back out. But now we had, the rumors spreading in this little tiny area that this house had all these problems. So we ended up having to spend some money to get everything inspected and certified that there was no problems. Again, all of this would have been avoided with a pre-sale inspection, dead horse alert. So when these people happen and they fall into your lap, I still believe that honey is going to get you a lot further than vinegar. I like rent discounts. I like bonuses if they stick around and they're cool, or if they move out. Like if they're just a total toxic situation, you know what? Give them a little bit of money or somehow compensate them for moving out if they get out by a certain date, kind of a cash for keys thing. Like, hey, I'm going to be there next week on Tuesday at 5. If the place is empty and broom clean, I'll give you $500. That $500 you spend to get that tenant out could mean the difference between your best buyer and maybe you're not best buyer. Put it in writing. So create a showing agreement with these tenants when the showings are allowed, that there is a 24, 48-hour notice, and what the expectations are for them and for you during these showings. That can alleviate a lot of this fear. Communication, very respectfully, very early, that you're selling the property and not evicting them. Also good. Explain to them that their lease, if they should sign one, must legally be honored by the new owner. That could alleviate a lot of their fears. But it all comes down to communication. So as you're working through the process, if you've got a very difficult tenant, you can't get them to leave, sit down, have a conversation with them. If you can't incentivize them, at least explain to them what you're doing and try to get their perspective. They're acting like this for a reason. Once you figure out what that reason is, it's a lot easier to diagnose it. But oftentimes, having some sort of agreement with them that says, hey, I get that this is not what you want, but it's happening. So it can happen with or without you. And I really need you on board. What can we do to make that happen? What does that look like? What would it take to get you on board and cooperative when it came to showings and walkthroughs and things like that? Explain to them, I'm asking for pre-approvals. I'm asking for letters of intent. I'm not just letting any, person that wants to walk through it. Explain to them your strategy and your plan for how things are going. Maybe they want out of a lease. Maybe they want into a lease. One way or another, there's a way to alleviate their fears. If they're really concerned about security, some tenants are, I would personally look into one of these inexpensive, like Simply Safe or one of these other types of security systems. It's Wi-Fi based. There's no subscription, but it's a simple camera. Send it to them sealed in a box from, Amazon or wherever you get this stuff. And then tell them, look, yes, there are going to be people walking through your property. Put this camera system up. I don't have any access to it. This is all you. You set it up. You set the passwords. You decide what the permissions are. And then let them have it. Just let them keep it or leave it if they don't want to keep it. But give that sense of control. Again, a few $100s, maybe at the most, for one of these systems, and you've solved a major problem with one of your tenants that now opens the door so you can do what you have to do. But I wouldn't buy it and install it for them. They're going to assume that you have access to it. Ain't going to make them feel any better. If you really can't get anywhere with these tenants, then just switch to curbside offers. Get your packet together, do the best you can with what you got, and then just roll with curbside offers. Most leases have a 24-hour notice for landlords to enter the building. So it's not like they can keep you out. Check your lease to be sure. I'm not an attorney, but almost all leases I've ever seen has some sort of clause that says, if I give you notice, you have to let me in, or I can come in with or without your permission. So don't want to go there if we don't have to. I'd much rather have them on board, but there's lots and lots of techniques for you here. And these are just a few that we've run into that have been very, very effective. The main objective here is to give you some techniques that work when you have a problem tenant. Hopefully you don't. All right. So in summary, I want you to communicate very, very well with your tenants. I want you to choose to be transparent as much as you can, and then offer some reassurances. We're not kicking you out. We're just exploring options on how to sell this place. Maybe one of these tenants steps up and decides to buy. Maybe they become your solution for a property management. You just don't know. Share your timeline. Let them know what's going to happen and when. Try to remove as much of that fear as possible. Because if you're silent, they're going to assume the worst. And one final note on dealing with your tenants is that subconsciously, we all understand and accept truth number 9, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. If you're dealing with a potential buyer and that buyer gets wind that you and your tenants are at odds right now, that's going to plant another seed of doubt that maybe you're a scoundrel. Maybe you're not somebody they should be dealing with financially. And you don't want to give them that window especially if it's not true. You don't want to give them this sense that you're not the kind of person who can be trusted, because clearly your tenants hate you. And maybe it's because you're a hard-knuckled business person. Okay, that's fine, but you don't want to send unnecessary signals to a buyer that could cost you a buyer or part of a deal or maybe some of the best terms. So once you've moved forward, we've gotten our offers together, we have to move into the due diligence phase. This is where prep and having all of your ducks in a row before you start negotiating comes into play. This is where the payoff is because the more of these things that you have, the less likely it is that you're going to have this deep dive due diligence. There's a lot of alliteration there, but anyway, because speaking of alliteration, perfect prep prevents problems and poor prep promotes problems. So if you skipped over all the prep, you didn't put your packet together and do some of those things, you're going to end up with an offer on the table that has a lot of backdoors, a lot of off ramps, and a lot of things that could either kill the deal or cost you a lot of money. When we prep correctly and negotiate effectively, we can get rid of a lot of that stuff. So serious buyers will have reviewed your offer packet. If you've got somebody that came along that for whatever reason didn't review it and is just shooting you an offer, these are bottom feeders. They're not serious. They're going to shoot you an offer, get it together, and then go, oh, I didn't see this, even though it was all available to them. So during the negotiations or before you even start entertaining these offers, make sure you verify that they have read and understand and accepted all of the documents in your pack. They know what the leases are. They know the P&Ls. They know the rent rolls. They know the condition of the property. So they can't later come back and use that as a reason to beat you up. Then any missing paperwork. So if you've got property disclosures or things that you're requiring the buyer to sign off on as part of the deal, close the loop before you accept the offer. Because when you accept an offer that has lingering details that are missing, maybe a pre-approval, maybe it is a property disclosure or something like that, that just opens the door for that deal to die. That's an off-ramp. Close the off-ramp. Get it locked down prior to accepting the offer. Do yourself that favor. And furthermore, if you've used the checklist on pages 79 and 80 of our Home Seller Toolkit, you'll know what's there and what isn't there. And when you're in the offer, you can use in the toolkit pages 48 through I think 55 is nothing but offer forms, checklists, guides, everything you need to know about the offer and multiple offer process. But their motivation is highest before the offer. So if you're missing anything, get it then. Get it during that phase. Because after they sign the deal, what was once just a minor bother is going to turn into an excuse to kill the deal. We don't want that. No bueno, no good. So if you get through due diligence and you're on your way to closing, then great. You probably don't need me much anymore. I would say that you're on your way to a successful closing and you should be good to go. But if a tenant leaves, which happens, sometimes you put a deal together based on a lease and the tenant breaks the lease and leaves, that could very well alter the terms. You have to disclose it if you know about it prior to closing. And it either may change the terms or maybe they don't care because they're relieved they wanted that tenant gone or who knows. But you still have to tell them about it. Talk to the buyer and say, hey, look, one of my tenants just bolted on me. I'm going to go in and clean it up if that's okay with you prior to closing. But do you want me to place another tenant or do you want me to leave it for you? Now, I love these assumptive because that assumes they're going to continue. I wouldn't call them up and say, hey, do you still want the deal? I would never do that. I would say, hey, a tenant left. I'm going to clean it up and get it ready to rent again. Do you want me to find a renter or would you rather do that? Now, if they're going to kill the deal, that's when they'll tell you. But if they say something like, no, go ahead and find the tenant, or no, don't worry, or yeah, could you screen tenants and then let me make the final choice? Great, we're moving forward. That's what matters. If you do end up with a vacancy and a rebound, meaning the property is going back on the market because the deal died over the vacancy or something else. But if you've got a vacancy, a new one, and you can clean it up, fix it up, photograph it, make it look beautiful, you may actually open yourself up to more buyers because having that one unit open, like we talked about earlier, could attract an owner occupant type investor who wants to live there while they're still being a landlord. So fantastic. And finally, I did a whole episode on rebounding a while back. I'll link to it in the show notes. And that way, if you do find yourself in this situation, go back through this episode, do the prep, do all the other work that you need to do, figure out what went wrong so we don't repeat the process, and then use our rebound playbook to get it back on the market. And then if it does happen, if the deal dies, make sure you talk to your tenants again. Let them know, hey, that other owner walked away. Can't really get into why, but they did. So we're going to either keep it or we're going to put it back on the market. and just wanted you guys to be in the loop. That will reassure them, help keep the fear at a minimum level, because fearful tenants are a problem. And when you're rebounding, this is in the rebounding episode, but if you want the TLDR on it, when you're rebounding it, make sure you tell the market in the public remarks and the broker remarks, assuming it's allowed in your MLS, what happened. And there's two versions. One, buyer's financing fell through. That's it. Just put it in the notes. First buyer's financing fell through. End of story. Or first buyer got cold feet. Psst, just be done. If people want to talk more about it, tell them, naturally, I can't get into it. But that's what happened. Then hopefully we move on. So know why you're selling. Know your prep and get it all done. Do not skip the prep. Protect your income, respect your tenants, and be investor ready with your super investor pack. So in the home selling toolkit, as I mentioned, you can get it for free. I've got the rent roll template, the letter of intent sample, and the entire investor tenant selling checklist. So visit talkingrealty.com, check the show notes, check the comments if you're on YouTube, and I'll have links to all of that stuff. And with that, I will let you get back to your day. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully you learned a little something, maybe had some fun. If any of this content was at all useful to you, I would really love it if you would share it somewhere privately, put it on the socials, forward it, do something. But the only way we spread the word about this podcast is if you guys are talking to people. So thank you for all who are doing that. But as a reminder, the Talking Realty podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Property Group, our family-owned company where we sell homes for a low flat fee. If you have a question, if you have a guest, if you have a topic that you would like to see on YouTube or hear on the podcast, on this show, I want to hear from you. So head to Talking Realty and say hello. Until next time, keep making smart moves in your real estate journey. For the Ohio Property Group, this is Glen Whitten signing off. And remember, you can sell it. We can help.